Welcome to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast, where we help you in the LGBTQ plus community find a safe and affordable retirement place. Join Marc Goldstein as he interviews others who live in gay-friendly places around the globe. Learn about the climate, cost of living, healthcare, crime and safety, and more. Now, here's your host, Marc Goldstein.
Today, we journey to Chicago, Illinois with our guest, Marc Goldberg. Marc is a dog trainer and author, and we'll tell you a little bit about Marc. Marc had his first paying client while still in junior high school and printed his first business card in 1975 at the age of 17. Marc first completed an American Kennel Club obedience ring at age with his first dog, a Sheltie named Gus. They won high in trial, beating out nearly 100 dogs, and they won a Dog World Magazine award the same year. Very impressive.
Well, it makes me sound important.
Marc became the youngest voting member of the of the Philadelphia Dog Training Club. He trained dogs for private clients during college at Frankin Marshall and taught classes for the college adult education program. Marc became a full-time professional dog trainer in the Chicago area. He served as president of the International Association of Canine Professionals. Now he writes books with the Monks of New Skete, I've heard of them too, who are the New York Times best-selling authors. Together, they have co-authored 3 books: Let Dogs Be Dogs, The Art of Training Your Dog, and their newly released book, The Joy of Playing with Your Dog. Marc lives with his partner and their 2 beloved dogs. So welcome, Marc.
That was
welcome
a great
to
read.
the podcast.
Good read.
Thank you.
Also,
thank you.
I'd especially like to thank my mother for writing that beautiful introduction for me. Made me sound important.
You are very important.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. So let's tell you a little bit about Chicago. Chicago is the state capital of Illinois, an inland city bordering the Hill Country region. Home to the University of Illinois flagship campus, Chicago is known for its eclectic live music scene centered around country, blues, and rock. Its many parks and lakes are popular for hiking, biking, swimming, and boating. South of the city, Formula One circuit of the America's Raceway have hosted the United States Grand Prix. Population Chicago back in 2020 was approximately in the city 965,000. And as Marc tells us, the metro area was approximately 3 million. So Marc, welcome to the podcast, and tell our audience, how long have you lived in Chicago, and where did you live before that?
Well, thanks for having me, Marc. So I was born a small crying baby in Philadelphia. And and I lived there till I was, out of college, let's say. And then after that, I stayed in the Philadelphia region and went to work. But it wasn't too long before a job opportunity came up that I really wanted to follow up on in the Chicago area. And so I left Philly in 1983, and I've been here ever since. And I'll tell you that the most remarkable thing is I'll never forget that year, because I arrived in Chicago in April. By June, it was 100 degrees and humid, and it stayed 100 humid degrees until September. And then on Christmas Eve, the wind chill factor was 87 below. And so the weather here just really, everybody knows Chicago is the windy city and it's cold, but I was not prepared. However, I am now, and it took a little bit of time, but I really settled into the Midwest, and I do love it here. So
great.
As far as lakes go, real quick, I'll just say we have one big lake, Marc. It's called Lake Michigan. And the super nice thing about the Chicago area is the city has miles and miles and miles of beach and shoreline, and all of it's public. There is no private beach holding in Chicago. So all of it is public park.
But you could only go to the beach, 2 weeks out of the year in the summer?
Maybe 3,
just
in a good year.
Just kidding.
Yeah, it's definitely not. It's not It's not Florida. It's not California. It's not even Rehoboth. But in
It's
those,
certainly not Phoenix.
No, it is not. But let me just say, in the correct 30 days in Chicago, you will see more shirtless men than anywhere on earth, because we take advantage of our vitamin D here. As little as we get, they take advantage of it. It's a good thing. Well, it's a friendly area. Cool. It's got a lively,
cool.
gay.
I like to see.
Super gay neighborhood. Just a very accepting.
Oh, we'll talk about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, geographically speaking, where is Chicago located within the state of Illinois?
It's northeast. Yeah. Anyway, Illinois is a long state. Northern Illinois is, how shall I put this? Civilized, blue. And the further south you get, the more ding 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 ding. You begin to hear the Deliverance soundtrack as you go. But the population is heavy at the north. On the southern border, we have Missouri. On the northern border, we have like Michigan and Wisconsin, and then it's Canada. So we're pretty far north.
Right.
Yeah, up here.
Okay. So you gave us a little preview about the climate. It gets how cold in the winter?
Well, I don't remember a worse year than 83, when we think not just in terms of actual temperature, but wind chill. Wind chill was 87 below. Things have gotten a little easier with global warming. We have noticed the difference here. Listen, I'll put it like this. In Philly, I remember when I was a kid, there would be warnings on the television news, bundle up, frostbite danger, it's going to go down to 20 degrees. And they meant 20 above zero. Here, They don't give you any kind of warning until it's going to be at least 10 below zero. We do get 20 below zero, the actual real temperatures. But fortunately, it's been a little while since I can remember a winter that was that rough. But biting, humid, cold winds and temperatures of 10 or 15 degrees for weeks on end, that's not so unusual. Sad, which is why, by the way, the national pastime, the metropolitan pastime of all people who have lived through one or two Chicago winters is debating retirement destinations. I mean, people start that conversation here when they're 20 years old. So
where are you going to retire? I only have 50 years to go, but let's think about it now.
They do. We do. It is our pastime. It is what we noodle about and ponder the most. And we're trying on places as soon as we learn to put the hand warmers in our gloves. We're trying to figure out where we're going to go after this. Yeah.
But are you staying?
So that's a complicated question. I've been debating retirement destinations for years, and I've tried it on every which way, and I have a lot of places on a bucket list. And I've traveled, fairly extensively for a Midwesterner anyway. But I keep coming back to the potential of sheltering in place for retirement. And I think the major reason for that, I have a couple. And one is I love what I do, and I can do it here better than most other places. I'm on a beautiful little farm of about 3 acres, but my little 3 acres, I call this place the Little Dog Farm, and it's tucked into a 500-acre forest preserve. So I've just got hundreds and hundreds of acres to play on, but I only pay taxes on 3 of them. So there's that. Yeah. And then I'm passionate about the work. I love the work, the writing and the training of dogs. And the writing you could do anywhere, and I have. But I'm a little tied to this land. I woke up one morning and looked out. My bedroom window looks out onto the 500 acres, and I saw a bald eagle in one of my trees. They fly a river near here. I see fox and all sorts of critters and animals, and so it's just a beautiful area. The weather. So I think I might make a good snowbird. I think maybe that's the conclusion starting to come to. That might be a solution.
There you go. Yeah, so maybe we could switch, because in 120 degrees in the summer here, I could use a little Chicago weather.
Well, I will tell you this: you don't have to shovel sunshine, So
That's right.
There is that advantage. I have a monster snow blower, and
How much snowfall do you get?
Well, we're not quite snowbelt. I used to own a vacation house just across the other side of the lake in Michigan. And oh my God, if we would get 6 inches here in Chicago, at my other house, we'd get 3-4 feet. So it's not that bad, especially the last
So you don't
years.
get lake effect?
Well, yes, you get lake effect, which just can mean that it'll snow very, very hard and very fast for a while close to the lake. So, but I'm about 35, 40 miles inland from the lake. So we didn't get so much of that. It's not a 6-inch snowfall is no big deal. A 12, 14-inch snowfall, we'll get that from time to time. The real issue is this. When I was a young man in Philadelphia, you get a nor'easter come in and linger over the city, and it might plop 3 feet of snow on top of Philly, in 48 hours. But
Right.
then another day or two later, it would just be melted and gone. In fact, the city would snow blow it into streets that they would just close, waiting for it to melt. And then a couple days later it would melt. They'd open that street up again. In Chicago, once it starts snowing in December or January, it doesn't melt until March. It just accumulates.
It stays.
So that's the difference. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So is living in an LGBTQ community important to you? And tell us a little bit about the community. Tell us about Boys Town. And I've heard about it, never been there. Tell us a little bit about it.
So, well, first, right now, I live in I think Illinois is considered a blue state, but I live in a red dot within the blue state. So, I mean, I'm in a pretty solidly Republican kind of conservative area. Fortunately, most of the "Let's Go Brandon" signs, are gone. I think they just got tired of those. But let me backtrack a little. I have lived in the city proper of Chicago, and I find most of the city itself to be very diverse, very welcoming. In the burbs back then, when I first moved there, if you saw a kid with blue hair and facial piercings and a bunch of tattoos, you thought poorly of them. But when I got to the city, they were your cashier at Whole Foods. It was just like no big
Right.
deal. And nobody looking funny at them. And you'll remember this too, because we're very close in age, Mark. But it meant something to me that at the checkout counter of the grocery store was, not only the usual rags, the Enquirer and all of those, but Out Magazine was like right there too. It wasn't something hidden in the back.
Right.
You had to, secrete it. And so I find it still is a very welcoming and diverse place. And I lived all over Chicago's north side until eventually I wound up I owned a house in Boys Town, like right in the epicenter, ground zero of Boys Town on Halstead Street, right near Belmont. And it was a really fun place. I mean, the Gay Pride Parade kicked off at my front door. We have this festival called Market Days in August, which is a giant gay, flea market festival. They get entertainers like Margaret Cho. People just come and jam. And it was very, very, very fun. But eventually, just I'm kind of like a suburban rural kind of guy. So eventually the traffic, the parking issues, really limited spaces to run dogs. Which is why I bought that farm in Michigan to run the dogs. I just decided it was time to go back to the burbs. I had my fling with Boys Town, but I mean the entire neighborhood, the decor of that neighborhood, city sponsored, is rainbow flag pride, pylons, stanchions, painting, sidewalk paint, street paint. I mean the whole place is a rainbow, and to have the city participate in maintaining the nature of the neighborhood at that time was really meaningful. And to have the police guarding, listen, I remember, cursed be his name, but do you remember a fellow now rotting in hell named Fred Phelps? He was the guy, he was the preacher from this weird little church in Kansas. And he was famous, he became famous for traveling to funerals of American heroes, our war dead, holding up signs that said God hates fags. Surely you're going to remember that guy. Yeah. And so, a real nutball. And he had a small following of, people. At any rate, this was in the era when he was coming into our town and protesting right prior to gay marriage. It was just a beautiful thing to see the police come in and protect us during gay pride, just in case there were counter protests. To have the police bring in horses to line up in front of Fred Phelps and just push him back away from the crowd. Mm-hmm. I don't want to disrespect the fact that Black Lives Matter and the Black experience in Chicago has been vastly different than the white experience in Chicago vis-a-vis the place. And I understand that a certain amount of white privilege rides along with any view that I might have. But I guess what I want to say is that overall, the city at that time felt like a welcoming, and safe place. But by the same token, I have not found the suburbs to be oppressive the way some people complain about their location in other states. I live with my boyfriend. This is a small neighborhood. I live on a little dead end street with probably 10 houses. And, it's kind of a live and
nobody cares, right?
No. In fact, when I don't remember what it was that set off my boyfriend, and he went and planted a bunch of, I know. A neighbor up the street, planted an American flag in the front yard, which, by the way, it's my flag too. Mm-hmm. I remember back when an American flag wasn't a statement other than, I love my country. Right. At any rate, when that American flag went up, my boyfriend, that set off a little thing in him. And, I woke up one day and there was gay pride stuff fluttering all around all around the outside of my house. And then, months later, I was mowing the lawn, I'm on the tractor, and one of my neighbors from across the way stops me. He's waving at me, I turn off the tractor to talk to him. And he said, I see the pride stuff. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay, here we go. And he goes, what do you think about Trump? I was like, I just pointed to the gay pride stuff. I go, that's what I think about Trump. And he said, oh, thank God. Now, this is a guy and his wife I've known for 15 years. Because nobody moves in or out of this. This street, people die here and they get carried away. That's how it works. So I've known him forever, but we just don't talk that kind of stuff in this neighborhood. But when he goes, oh, thank God. He goes, we're the only ones. And he's not gay. He's straight, but he's right. We're the only ones. He goes, and then he told me about the fruit trees in his backyard that I didn't even know were there. He goes, just bring a basket. I got peaches rotting on the tree. Go help yourself. But so it's a pretty welcoming place. I feel fine here. But then again, this may come surprising to you and your audience, but of the pair of us, between me and my boyfriend, I'm the butch one. So he disagrees with me on this point, and he's much more comfortable in places where boys in skirts with pink hair would be comfortable.
So he's more of the city of Chicago.
He sees bricks. He sees bricks and parking meters, and he feels like, oh, Dorothy, I'm home. Yeah. Whereas I need Walmart and acres of free parking, but it's understandable.
I definitely get it, because I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and all my life I lived in New York. Mostly all my life I lived in New York. So I get it. And coming out to Phoenix is a little bit different. A lot different, I should say. But where I am, I'm in the middle of the city. So I can definitely relate that, I need that city connection.
Well, what you generally get in the types of cities that at least I'm used to is you get diversity. So nothing
Yes.
particularly stands out unless you're in Wilton Manors and you're pushing a baby stroller, in which case then you might you might stand out, you know. But cities give you diversity, and diversity creates a certain level of acceptance. And also too, I swear, people have this mistaken sense that the city is a cold, barren, concrete jungle, but in reality, in the city, we're used to sharing space. We're used to sharing public and private space. And so
Right.
if you're in line at a coffee shop, even if it's a Starbucks, you're in line in Chicago, and if it's going to be a while, you end up talking to the people all around you about anything.
Oh, yeah.
And if you talk to
Yeah.
somebody in the suburbs in line at a Starbucks, they're like moving away from you. They're like worried what
Yeah,
you
like,
want.
what's this guy want?
It's very unusual. People keep much more to themselves in the burbs, really.
So Boys Town is the neighborhood, right, of Chicago?
Well, let me just say was. As so often happens, the gays, we gentrify, sweetheart.
Right. And then we move along.
Worst financial decision I've ever made in my entire life, of one of many, but this is the most remarkable of all of them, was a buddy of mine. We were investing in a little bit of real estate here and there, and he wanted to buy houses, single family dwellings in the Lakeview Boys Town neighborhood of Chicago. And I said, are you effing kidding me? Who's going to go down there and collect rent? I'm like, no way. Because these houses were available for $150,000, $200,000. Most of those houses have now been knocked down, and there's $1.5 million houses standing in their stead. A few of them rehabbed. But I mean, what happened there is insane. So what that gentrification did was it made rents and purchases difficult for the gays. And even during my time there, which was like 99 through 07, 08, we did start to see a lot more strollers. It was always a neighborhood that had straight people and all kinds of people in there, but it just became more and more gentrified. And so gay people, well, the lesbians had really popularized Andersonville, which is another slightly grittier neighborhood a little further from the lake. And then I think a lot of gay people moved there, uptown. So I guess what I want to say is I think a lot of people have the impression, at least in Chicago now, that Boys Town is for your rich gays. And the poor gays have to go elsewhere. And I think by and large do. Yeah.
So where are the gay bars located? Are they all over the city?
Well, there's a real concentration of them still in Boys Town. So Boys Town it's on the north side of the city. It's pretty close to the lake. You may not be able to envision this, but anybody who's been to Chicago will probably know where Wrigley Field has been, where the Cubs play. And that's on the north side of the city, right off Addison Street. If you just walk about 6 to 7 blocks east from Wrigley, where the Cubs play, you will unmistakably come across a street called Halsted Street, which runs north and south. And from
wasn't he a porn star?
Halsted? I didn't even know there was a Halsted. Let me just say,
he was a porn star.
If Halsted was a porn star, but I think the age of that street goes back before porn.
Okay. Okay.
As do I,
And me.
Remember films? There was Super 8 films.
Yeah.
If you found that your father had one, it was always the wrong damn kind of film.
Right.
Which, by the way, was probably a good thing. Imagine.
No. Yep.
But okay. So anyway, not all, but most of the gay bars are kind of sprinkled on Halsted Street between Belmont and Broadway and Addison, excuse me. But then there's more. There's bars on the South Side. There's bars like I said, in the African American South Side areas, in the Latino, La 26, the 22nd Street area. There's Latino gay bars. So, and in Andersonville, there's gay bars. So, I think the heaviest concentration of your prototypical gay bar is in Boys Town, but there's certainly other areas, but where there are more besides.
So being Chicago is such a large city, is it hard to meet people like other fellow gay friends?
The suburbs. The suburbs is where it's hard to meet people. the suburbs, the
Okay.
city. Oh my God, just step outside your door. You know, when I, okay, so I had I'm not Mr. Social. I am Mr. Social Awkward. Okay. I'm pretty good in front of a camera because I'm used to this, but just drop me alone anywhere where I got to talk to people. And I'm either the life of the party or I'm hiding behind the potted plants, like
Sounds
nowhere
like
in the
me.
middle. Right. So must be a Marc Gold thing, right?
Yeah. I
Well,
think we're
anyway,
brothers from another mother.
Mother. Well, gay Jews. Let me just say, power to the people. Sorry, Mom. But, I didn't name me. We did not name ourselves Mark. You did that.
Right. Thank you.
I had a Doberman. I had this big, beautiful, he looked scary because he was a giant, 100-pound Doberman, but he was a cream puff. He loved everybody and everything. And I was vaguely friendly with the owner of one of the gay bars up the street. And one day I'm walking the dog up the street. During the day, the bar was open, but just nobody in it. And Gino is like waving me in, and I point down. I got the dog, and he's like, "Get in, get in." So I bring him in, and I'm like, "What?" He goes, "I don't have a food license, so like you can bring a dog in here." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And then he goes, "Here," and he starts feeding the dog cherries off the bar. So now he's teaching, and I'm a dog trainer, okay? So like, I don't feel like my dog should be eating red dye number 3. And also,
right.
I've kind of taught him, don't put your feet up on counters. And here with one damn cherry.
He's like begging.
Well, let me tell you, after that, I couldn't walk past that bar. That dog dragged me in. And what I noticed was, if I walked into that bar, during hours when there were, guys in there, if I walked in there alone, nobody saw that I was there. I mean,
but if you were with a dog,
if I brought the dog, a lot of times
it's like a dick magnet.
It was a boy mag. Yeah, he really was. He was a boy mag. And the way it worked was the bar faced the street. So the patrons were facing away from the big windows in the street. So when I would come in the front door, everybody had their back to me. They didn't realize I was there. But the dog, I will tell you, he had a very conveniently bad habit, which was he was a dick checker or a butt poker. And so he would just work his way up and down the bar, sticking his nose, right? And, they would turn around and then shriek because, oh my God, it's a 100-pound dog.
This huge dog.
Yes, I feel violated. And so, and then I would excuse him. And actually, to be honest with you, Mark, what I discovered was the dog was so friendly. His name, by the way, was Diablo, and he was a wonderful, wonderful dog. I miss him dearly. I loved that dog. But he and I had different taste in men, okay? And we had different tastes. And I was meeting all the ones he wanted to meet, and that was not working for me. And so in short order, I trained him to wait for the signal. And the signal was just a little point in the direction of, the correct individual. And if I went like that, I would just bring him in and drop the leash, right? I didn't want him loose in there. And so I would drop the leash. If I went like that, he would go to that one, and then he would walk circles around that person until he had him tied up in the leash.
That's so funny.
Well, hopefully I'll never be single again because my boyfriend. I have a boyfriend, but let me tell you what, he was the best wingman that I could have ever had.
That's a great story.
So it was easy to meet people, but I don't think it was my charm. I think it was his.
That's so funny. All right, Mark. So tell us, what's the local economy like living in Chicago?
Well, it's diversified here. I don't think we're overly dependent on any one industry like Houston with oil and gas, New York with the financial markets, LA on the entertainment industry. Chicago has a lot of headquarters for various companies, and so we're very diversified here. Also, a lot of people move into Chicago, stay 3 to 5 years, and then they're transferred, they go elsewhere. And you see that kind of migration in and out, both in the city and in the suburbs. Excuse me. And what has done...
Cost of living? How about cost of living?
It's cheap compared to the East and the West Coast, relatively speaking. And let me give you a point of comparison. Where I live, let me just think from my house right into the into the interesting parts of the city of Chicago. Call it an hour. Traffic obviously can be worse, but on a good day, I'm like, woof, I'm an hour from the city. In the middle of the night, it's 45 minutes. Now, tell me, and Chicago's the third largest. We were the second city for decades. Only, in the last 15, 20 years ago, LA became the second city. So Chicago's the third most populous. New York, LA, Chicago. So tell me, if you were 45 minutes to an hour from the Empire State Building, what would a house on 3 acres cost you? That'd be what, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, but 40, close. What would it cost? Millions.
Yeah, it would be up there.
You can get that for $300,000 to $400,000 here. 5 if the house is real nice.
Wow.
It's a lot less. Yeah. So, and the reason for that is, unlike the East Coast, where those cities developed around cow paths and they're really tight central cities like Philly, Boston, Manhattan, obviously confined to just the island. This city was built along the side of a lake, and then it was able to just spread. If you were to drive from one end of Chicago land to the other at highway speed, it would take you an hour, a full hour. Wow. Just to traverse, it's vast. And so costs are a lot less. You can go to a really fancy cocktail place and pay $13, $14 for a cocktail. But the equivalent place in New York would be $20, $22, I think, probably.
So restaurants are cheap. What would you say is a normal?
We have fine dining here. Don't get me wrong. You can pay a lot of money for stuff. But I'm in comparison to New York and LA, cheap.
Mm-hmm. It's cheaper. Okay. Yeah. We'll leave it as that. How about utility bills and stuff like that, and gas and electric? Is that? So, I know you probably use a lot of electric for heating.
No, we have natural gas. I think there's a lot of natural gas for heating here. I'm not 100% the one to ask for. I'll tell you what I know, but here's where I'm handicapped on this issue. I live on a little farm. I have a kennel. I have a training center. I have a house. So I'm heating 3 buildings. I'm air conditioning, all of them. Mind you, I get to rotate, what's when. I always want the dogs to be climate controlled and comfortable. But I think it's rare that even with all of that my electric is going to run over $200 or my gas.
Wow.
So I don't really know what like normal people are paying here, because I feel like I have to be paying more. I get that chart, which is always telling me you spent 80% more than your neighbors. They're trying to like shame me into using less, but I can't help it.
I get that too. And here in Phoenix, it's ridiculous in the summer because we have to run it all the time.
You would. Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Tell us a little bit about the arts and culture scene in Chicago.
Oh, it's vibrant. It's very, very nice. Now, mind you, I spent a lot of time in my former life on the East Coast. You're from New York. You're from one of the 5, not the 6th borough, but you are from one of the 5 boroughs. You know about the 6th borough, right? And Miami. And then I want to go to Miami. But I also worked in New York. Well, that's the that's the old joke.
Forget it.
We know the same joke.
Yeah, it's like one of these Jewish jokes.
It is. Sorry. So, but I worked in Manhattan also. My mom still lives 20 miles, from the Lincoln Tunnel. So I'm really super familiar with New York. And it's very hard to judge any place in comparison with New York because you have Broadway. But my boyfriend, I didn't know you could major in musicals in college, but something like that. He'll kill me if I get it wrong, because it was really like musical. It was like direction, or basically he majored in musicals. And so he keeps up. We have a series called Broadway in Chicago, and we usually get the Broadway cast. Like I just saw Stephen Sondheim's play called Company with the
Mm-hmm.
Broadway cast, which is now traveling, and they were here. So we do get to see a fair amount of musical theater. We have symphony. I no longer have seats to the opera, but back in the day I did. Now if we see an opera, we just pick and choose the one we want to see. But the Lyric Opera in Chicago is beautiful. We not only have a paid zoo on the outskirts of the city, but we have a free zoo right in the middle of the city, right on the lake, called Lincoln Park Zoo, which is beautiful. So there's paid things to do, but there's also free things that you can pop into. But it's very, very lively here for theater and arts.
Awesome.
Also, there's a really, I don't know what we
so.
call it here. It's like an off Broadway. There's all these little tiny theaters. The Annoyance Theater, the Sports Theater. There's all these little weird theaters that just have
the Annoyance Theater.
It's a very fun place. It's built on top of a liquor store, which makes it a lot less annoying because you just have to go through the liquor store to get upstairs.
I like it. I like it.
It's very fun. Very, very fun.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Now I know about restaurant scene has to be great as well.
It's very good. That is one where I moved in the burbs. Is to when I was a kid in college, what we used to call Hamburger Row. Okay, it's like 13 fast food restaurants, all located in a row. And so depending, right? The city, it's so much better. There's just no reason to cook when you're living in the city. There's every sort of ethnicity of food. The burbs, it's Olive Garden. Until you get into some of the real highfalutin, really expensive burbs along the lake. But the city proper is wonderful for food. The suburbs, well, there is definitely a Midwestern palate. Here's what passes. Turkey, white bread, mayonnaise, iceberg lettuce, Thousand Island dressing. I've just described the Midwestern palate.
That's Midwest.
Did I forget chicken fingers? So with ranch dressing, that's not just on the kids menu. That's on the adult menu at every restaurant.
How about Chicago pizza? We didn't. How about Chicago pizza?
It's very good.
I would think.
We have here in Chicago, we have something called deep dish pizza.
Deep dish.
Yeah. Chicago pizza falls into a subcategory of gastronomy called Chicago food. And every region has its food. So probably there are two things at the top of the Chicago food pyramid, two or three. Let's say deep dish pizza. It's thick. I mean, it's really, there's a lot of bread, but there's so much ingredients too that it's not just bread. My New York friend calls it casserole. He mocks it because, he lives in Manhattan. He says it's a casserole, but they do have to cook it in a pan with very high sides. And you know how with a New York pizza, it's these big slices and you can eat like 3 or 4 of them on a, if you're hungry. With Chicago pizza, they cut it thinner, but it's very tall and you can eat like 2 pieces and then you're done.
And that's it.
That's it.
There was a place, I forgot the name of it. There was a chain that started in Chicago. Hot dogs, hamburgers, pizza.
Oh, you're talking about Portillo's, I believe.
Portillo's.
We
had one in Florida.
Yeah. For all the ex-Midwesterners.
They spread to Florida. I think they're here. In Arizona,
They do have one in Phoenix. There's 1 or 2 in Southern California now, but it's a Chicago chain. We have a Portillo's about 4 miles from the door here, real close. And what Portillo's is, they got a lot of things that are good, but what they're probably most famous for is what in Chicago is called Italian beef. It's not the same as the Philadelphia cheesesteak, and I'm a Philadelphian by birth, so I would know the difference. It's not the same, except for it's beef and bread, but it's good. I would say the cheesesteak's better, guys, but Italian beef's pretty damn good. But it's the Chicago hot dog that I feel like really separates this city from any other when it comes to tube steak. And that's because, well, in Philly and in New York too, same thing. There's only X number of condiments that you put on a hot dog. Now, in New York, maybe sauerkraut, and if so, that's all you put. And
mustard.
there you go, and mustard. Here, they never heard of sauerkraut with hot dogs. It's like unheard of. Also, do you know what's verboten to put on a hot dog here? If you ask for ketchup on a hot dog out here, they're going to look at you like you're some kind of heathen, like you just like you just like you're a heathen, like you came into church and spit on the floor right in front of the priest. And I mean, it's unheard of. But in Philly, you know, ketchup, mustard, relish, onions, that's it. So that's everything, right? So I get here, I don't remember how long I was here, not long, and I wanted a hot dog. I didn't know about dogs. I just wanted a hot dog. And the guy says, what do you want on it? And I said, everything. And he looks at me, and I said, everything. When I opened the package, I was actually angry, Mark. I was mad. I was like, what the fuck? They put a salad bar on top of my hot dog. It's like about 18 or 20 ingredients. And first of all, it was stacked up. It was ridiculous. The relish, I don't know why, but when you get relish here, it's not like normal pickle relish that you would see. They dye it some sort of fluorescent green. It's not a color found in nature. And I don't know why Chicago has fluorescent, you know, but it's some kind of fluorescent color. Relish. But they also, not only do they put relish on it, it's and by the way, no ketchup. It's mustard, relish, slices of tomato. I don't mean like whole giant wedges of tomato. I know, right? An entire pickle spear. They put the pickle spear on last because if they do, they can't get anything else on it. Celery salt, onions, sport peppers. I forget the whole range of it's a lot of ingredients. But let me just say it's very difficult to open your mouth that wide. Don't brag. Just go with it. I'm sure it would be hard. It would be hard for you. Don't brag. Anyway, it's hard. It's hard to open your mouth wide enough to like fit this monster. Why do I feel dirty discussing this topic? Anyway,
because
it's drippy.
The nature of the topic.
It is.
And it's dripping.
It's drippy. But when I got over my initial, you know, damn it, like what have they put on here? I was like, I thought the guy was like screwing with me, that he went to the salad bar and compiled it. But I'm one of these people who, you know, let's get Mikey. He can eat anything, you know, that I can eat it.
Hey, Mikey.
I mean, I've eaten grilled grasshoppers in both Thailand and Mexico, so I'm game, right?
Ugh.
Not too kosher, but I went for it. And all I could say is the further down this hot dog I got, the more I realized this is beautiful. This is a thing of beauty. It's amazing. So Chicago really has turned the hot dog into a thing that is uniquely its own, and it's just better than a hot dog that you're going to get almost anywhere else. So we do have.
So do people actually eat hot dogs like that? Do people actually eat hot dogs like that?
Yeah, yes, they do. Actually, I would say the most common hot dog order here would be, how do you want it? It's like Portillo's. Everything, no peppers. Because otherwise, the peppers are... The thing about these little peppers... And I've spent a great deal of time in Mexico, so I like hot things. It's just that they're not for gringos. They're kind of hot, you know. For in Mexico, it wouldn't be hot, but for here, it's pretty hot. And also, they pickle them whole, and they're small but juicy. So when you bite into them, Mark, they tend to explode and squirt.
They squirt.
Yes.
They squirt.
Not in a good way.
And you're drooling.
It's a bit messy. So I tend to hold back on the peppers, you know, unless I have the Tums handy and a lot of napkins. It's beautiful. And yeah, you know, if you would ask people in Chicago, you tell me New Yorkers would put warm sauerkraut on a hot dog, they think you were crazy. But yes,
that's the New York way.
Nathan's.
Warm sauerkraut. Maybe onions if you're, you know, onions and mustard. That's it.
And at Nathan's, correct me if I'm wrong, they toast the bun, which is not done here.
They do.
Here the bun is steamed. so it will be extra soft. And
Oh,
it has
okay.
poppy seeds on
I
it.
think maybe a dirty water dog on the street of New York, you'll get steam buns.
Are they still $1? Because when I last left New York, they were $1.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
No, they're probably
not.
like 3. Yeah.
Times change.
All right. We had a little education on hot dogs. I love it. Tell us a little bit about public transportation. It's a big city. I know public transportation has to be good. And they do have like a subway, don't they?
Well, we have an L. It's an elevated train. There are very few places where it goes underground. It's all built above ground, which is why it's called the L. And there's multiple lines. Listen, when you're renting a place in Chicago, the closer to the L stop you rent, the more expensive the place. Unless you're built on top of it, in which case it's noisy. But people want to live there because it's convenient. You can get anywhere in the city by L. There's buses now. Well, there's always been buses. But now, when I was living there, there was no app for the buses, so you didn't know when it was going to come. You knew when it was supposed to come. But I think there's an app now for the CTA, the Chicago Transit Authority. So you can just look and you know when to go to that bus stop, which is kind of a big deal because it might be 0 degrees and windy when you want to wait for the bus. But buses in the L are your primary. Now, of course, obviously there's Uber all over the place, Uber and Lyft, which is private transportation. But coming out of the bars at night, I used to, I didn't want to drive. If I was far from home, it was very nice. But we just hailed cabs. I don't think that happens. I see there are still taxis in Chicago, but there were thousands and thousands of them in there.
Right.
Now there are
like New York.
Yeah, very, very few.
So if you live in the city proper, can you not have a car? Can you walk everywhere?
So the answer is yes, but you'd have to live in one of the city neighborhoods that had good access to that public transportation, and they don't all. Some neighborhoods in the northwest part of the city, you would think you were in the suburbs. They have the bus, but you're nowhere near the L. And so I think certain neighborhoods are much better for public transportation than others would be the main thing.
Got it.
When I was in Paris using the metro there, what I noticed was pretty much anywhere you'd want to go in Paris, you can get there by metro. And Chicago is not that good. It's not as good as that.
Yeah, Europe is unbelievable when it comes to public transportation and walking everywhere. So
I got better.
I'm a walkability type person. I hate to drive.
I'm living in the burbs. In the burbs, I mean,
you have to.
You have to have a car, and so I'm really used to that. I was raised in the suburbs, so I guess I'm just used to it. But I think a lot of people in the city, a lot of people don't have cars. You don't. If you live in the right spot, you don't need a car, but you have to sort of buy or rent with that in mind. And I got dogs.
I was in Chicago once. I don't remember. I was a kid when I was in Chicago. Or my 20s, maybe. I remember the lake. I remember Marshall Fields. Where was I I was near Marshall Fields?
Well, you were downtown. You were in what we would call downtown. Yeah. You were near the lake. You were near Grant Park. You were near State Street. State Street, that great street.
Okay. Yep. All right. So it sounds like my kind of city because... except for me personally, the weather, but it has that New York vibe to it.
The difference I would say is that it's, because I'm real familiar with New York too, is it's not as vertical as New York. So of course we have skyscrapers, but they're not just all jammed together. Our city is spread out a bit more. And although it's a vibrant place, it doesn't have the same intensity that New York has. New York has a certain buzz, which can be a good thing if you're a tourist and you're there for theater and to see things. It has a vibrancy and energy. If you live there, you have to find you have to find places to just get a little bit of peace. I think you have to become familiar with the park, and that's why they go to New Jersey on the weekend or Vermont,
Right.
to get away somewhere to chillax. I would say Chicago is a much quieter, it's calmer. It's an exciting, vibrant city, but it is Midwestern in nature. And like, just as a quick example, when I first moved here, I drove like a Philadelphian. I drove like a New Yorker. I was willing to die to get that spot. You're letting me in. You just don't know it yet. And it took me maybe a month to realize they're letting me in. I don't have to force my way in. They're
right,
slowing
you don't
down.
have to fight.
No, there's just a certain level of courtesy here, and what it is, is there's fewer rats in the cage. You put too many rats in the cage and they start fighting over resources. And
I always
Midwest,
said growing up, Midwesterners are nice, calm people. I did. They were nicer people than New Yorkers were.
Well, like I said, we grew up in a cage with fewer rats. That would be why.
Right. That's it. You got it. Tell us a little bit about the crime situation. Chicago could be rough, huh?
I don't know the stats, but I do know you hear an awful lot about it. There was a period of time where you'd be hearing about 1 or 2 or 3 shootings every single weekend in this city. And I know it stopped a lot of people from coming here from tourism, and everybody was talking about it. But the sad part about that was, and I don't really know how it is now. I hear less about it now. But are you hearing a dog barking a lot right now? Do you hear the dog barking?
I hear doggies.
Okay. Well, give me 1 second and tell her to shut. It doesn't bother you? All right. Sorry. I'm a dog trainer, and there's dogs in the kennel that are upset right now. So, okay. Well, what you were hearing about in that period of time where there was, 3 people dying every weekend was on the South Side. And the South Side is largely African American. This is a city of diversity on the one hand. On the other hand, there's a fair amount of segregation in this city also. And I think a lot of people wonder if enough police resources have gone into the South Side to prevent those killings. I'm not really one to address the politics of it because I don't know. But what I can tell you is it didn't really become a concern to North Side white people until it started happening on the North Side. And then I think it became a little bit more of a concern. So, do we have crime? Yeah. 20 years ago, I would have told you it was a lot safer. Forgot my verb. It's a lot safer than New York, but I'm not so sure today. There is a fair amount of weird crime where you get people banding together on Facebook and then rushing into a department store and, robbing, 30 people going in at a time. You've heard about that in a variety of cities like LA, San Francisco. It's happened a couple of times here in Chicago too now. So I think you just have to exercise a lot of caution in any of the major cities today. In the suburbs, I don't hear too much about it in my particular suburb. But again, because it's a reasonably conservative suburb, maybe everybody has guns. I'm really not sure. I know that I'm near a lot of hunting land, and I hear gunfire during deer season, for example. So, but I will tell you, by and large, I think crime affects the minority community 10 times more in this metroplex than it does the white community. Not a fair thing, but I think that that's an accurate statement. But that's all I got. But in my area, my boyfriend's really irritated with me because, I'm like a cute little old white man. And several times I've been stopped by the police with him in the car, and I never get a ticket. I always crack a joke, and I've gotten like 3 warning tickets while he's in the car. And he's always mad at me. Like, why do you make the police laugh? Meantime, I have to stop him from putting a defund the police bumper sticker on my car. And I'm like, no, if we have I'll get real tickets then, No defund the police, I don't know. I have good luck with law
You're
enforcement.
hysterical.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
Actually,
thing.
honestly, I think
Is
it's
there a big
something to do with
homeless
the dog training
population?
thing. So there's always been homeless in Chicago, but the weather is so awful that you don't get a ton of people, coming here to become homeless because the weather is so bad. However, since Texas and Florida started sharing their migrants with us, I was just in O'Hare Airport in one of the terminals. It was filled with, I think they were Venezuelan, a lot of them, but it was like a migrant city that the city created for them
Wow.
while they're waiting for their adjudication. I mean, there are hundreds of tents and cordoned off sections, and I think they feed them and give them phones to access,
Wow.
or access to phones. And so the migration issue it's not just at the borders anymore. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible at O'Hare.
Yeah.
Tell us
Also,
about
by the way,
healthcare.
sorry, I will, but I wanted to say also apparently the police stations are filled with migrants too. They just put a lot of them at the police stations. That kind of public space, thousands of them were bussed here from Texas and I think Florida. I mean, I've lived all over Latin America, so I speak the language of these people. I have a real feel for why they come here. It's the same reason that your grandparents or great grandparents came here and mine
Came here.
because it's good. Right. Yeah. And it's because sometimes it's for economic opportunity, but for a lot of these people, it's because they are not safe. They're not safe.
Yeah.
In the climate of their own country. But that being said, we have a problem here in this country. We do. I don't think there's any denying it. I just don't think there's the political willpower to fix it because it's not a matter of walls. It's a matter of how we take our asylum applications and how we process them. And that's governed by Congress. So Congress, this is a matter of law, not right. There you go. I think it's a matter of law, not barbed wire. And honestly, I think that the Republicans don't have the balls to deal with this because big business wants these people for cheap labor. And I don't think that the Democrats have the balls to deal with it because they want the votes from their coalitions. And so I think that don't get me wrong. I mean, I really can't vote. I haven't been able to vote for a Republican candidate for a really, really long time because of the social insanity, of that party. But it's really Congress who could solve this problem, and they just refuse to do it because they're not willing to sacrifice, what it would take. But it's sad. It's putting a lot of people into a terrible position. But also, it's eating up a lot of resources that these cities need in order to govern, police, and maintain themselves. So Chicago's putting millions and millions of dollars into this. So
yeah, we have the same problem here in Phoenix.
Right.
So,
there's a way to fix it, but I don't think anybody's got the real political
10 cities.
fortitude to. It's very sad. Very sad. Yeah, and also the drug addiction stuff. All this is certainly different than when we were kids. It wasn't, things were not as scary or sketchy.
Oh, no. We were brought up and it was a great place to grow up in.
I mean, I was allowed out. I was turned loose after dark. Nobody kept track of me.
Yeah. I'd be out at all hours of the night and people in front of I lived in Brooklyn and people would hang out on the stoop or in front of the building at 2 a.m. and not even think about it.
Exactly. And I'm not sure that happens quite as much, or certainly in some of the neighborhoods.
Not at all. Yeah. But anyway, let's get back to healthcare. What's healthcare like in the city of Chicago?
Well, there's a lot of it here. There's a lot of good hospitals. There's a ton of healthcare here. But, and this isn't a Chicago issue, it's really an American issue. You have to be able to afford it. So you need the right you need the right insurance, and that's a problem in this country. But in terms of like access to healthcare, there's a ton of it here. There's some free healthcare here for the uninsured. There's Medicare for the uninsured too, in Illinois. But I'll tell you what, I hit 65. I got on Medicare. And as soon as that happened, I realized, holy cow, this is our government's way of rewarding you for surviving 65 years because it's so much cheaper than what I was paying because I wasn't, I'm a self-employed dog trainer.
Yeah.
And by the time I got off of Obamacare and onto Medicare, my Obamacare was costing me $1,025 per month.
Wow.
And I didn't even have the pregnancy coverage, for my,
Oh, my God.
I didn't. And
That money.
it was outrageous. And it was a good plan, but it wasn't like a zero deductible, zero out of pocket either. It was just a real solid plan. It's insane what's happening now. So when I got old enough to qualify for Medicare, I was just absolutely thrilled. The amount of money that I saved was, terrific. So we have it, but we have that American access problem, I would say.
We do. We definitely do.
Yeah.
I like Europe's way of healthcare a little bit better than ours. I think they have their stuff together. They have the public, they have the private, they have the choice. I don't know.
Canada does. Canada does that too.
Yeah. And I've been blessed. My husband was a teacher, so he's retired now, and he had a great healthcare insurance, program, which we took after his retirement, and we pay very little during the year. We're kind of blessed. So I think we paid
selected
like $800
him well.
a year.
Well, you're very, very detailed with your questionnaire, Mark. So I'm thinking that when you interviewed your husband, on Tinder, you asked him all these questions, and you selected somebody with great access to healthcare for your future. Did it work like that, or was it magic and chemistry?
It was magic.
There we go. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
That's right. That's right.
Beautiful. Me too.
Do you wish you had anything that you don't have? Do you wish you had something in Chicago that you had elsewhere, maybe in Philly, other than cheesesteak or tube steak? No, you have tube steak.
Yeah, no, I have an abundance. My boyfriend's Polish, so we're okay in that area.
Okay, it's a Polish sausage.
I should stop now. Is there something from the East Coast that, well, I miss snow. Yeah, let me tell you what I miss from the East Coast that I wish we had in Chicago. I wish we had spring, and I wish we had fall. In the East Coast, okay, you get that first crocus going, and then for a period of like 6 weeks, spring would slowly unfold. Before it was summer, and then the reverse. When the first leaf fell, you had 6 weeks, change color real slow. Here, spring is when you use the heat at night and the air conditioning in the morning, and fall is the other way around. Because in one day, you might need both heat, the central heat and central air. You might need them both. I remember once coming into the kennel, coming into my dog kennel, and the heater and the air conditioner were both running at the same time. Because it had gone from hot in the day to cold at night, and the air con hadn't kicked off yet. So we have very, very short, spring and fall here. And in fact, in Chicago, it's a popular thing to say that we only have 2 seasons: summer and construction. Those are our 2 seasons.
Fair enough. All right. Are there any cons of living out there besides the weather, of course?
Well, okay. Excuse me a little bit. When you live in a major East Coast city, Philadelphia, New York, Washington, Baltimore, anywhere on the Eastern Corridor, you can get in your car, you can drive 1, 2, 3 hours and be somewhere else new to just go have an experience. New Yorkers go to Vermont or Long Island, whatever. And in New Jersey, they go in for a weekend to Manhattan to see a show. So the first year that I was here, in the summer, I got a little bored. This was before the internet, because we're old, and I pulled out a map, and I looked to see what I could get to in a 2-hour drive. So I drew a circle. Well, you have the lake. Chicago's right on the lake. So that lets out like this whole big area. But I wanted to see, what could I drive to in 2 hours? And the answer was Milwaukee. That was it. There is nowhere to go. There is literally nowhere. You head west. If you go east from Chicago, you're in the water instantly. If you head west, you have city, suburbs, corn. And when you hit corn, you have corn all the way to Nebraska, like all the way to Nebraska. So there really is no such thing as just getting in the car and, driving a couple hours to another city. I got used to that, of course, but that's a difference. But, Arizona's like that. You guys drive 8 hours for milk once you're outside of Phoenix. It could be very big.
Well, we can kind of go to Vegas. We could drive to Vegas from here. We could drive to San Diego from here.
Yeah.
There's quite a few places we can go
there
to.
You go. We got nothing. We got Nebraska.
Nebraska. Iowa.
Mm-hmm. That's it. I've been to Iowa a bunch of times.
All right. And wrapping up. Iowa?
Yeah.
Corn.
Yeah.
More corn.
A lot of corn. Good pork.
So in wrapping up, what would you say to our audience if they're thinking about relocating to Chicago?
Get yourself a summer here in Chicago and a winter place anywhere else. Or if you're a person who likes cold, then, come on aboard.
Then it'd be perfect.
Nothing's perfect. Nothing's perfect.
Where could our audience find you on social media or online?
Well, there's a couple places.
Where could they buy your books?
Yeah, you could. I wrote I co-authored a bunch of books. This is the most recent. All my books are on Amazon, Walmart. I don't know, wherever you buy a book, just put my name into the search box, Marc with a C Goldberg, and my books will come up. And my website is chicagodogtrainer.com, chicagodogtrainer.com. And I have an Instagram too. It's Chicago_dog_trainer. That's all my socials. No TikTok.
All right.
I'm too old for the TikTok.
TikTok. Yeah, I'm on it, but I don't do anything on it.
I don't understand.
All right. Very good. Well, yeah, I know. It's our age thing. But thank you so much for joining us today. I learned a lot about Chicago, and we will talk soon. Thank you again, Marc.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast and consider making a donation by clicking the coffee cup on any page at www.wheredogaysretire.com. Each cup of coffee that you buy costs $5 and goes towards helping us continue the podcast. Thank you for your continued support.